On the same day that the founder of Hamas, the terrorist organization, called to be a day of rage, a rabbi's son in Surrey, BC, catches an anti Semite red handed as he's vandalizing his home and place of worship. Both him and his father, a rabbi, join us for today's report.
As you can see, guy's throwing eggs. I can't call, and he's throwing eggs at my house here. This is me over here, throwing eggs.
Although I've experienced anti-Semitism through my childhood and later on, much less so in Canada, especially in the 80s and 90s. So on that level, just the egg throwing is egg throwing. But the reality is, the thought that I should throw eggs today because they are Jewish sits on top of a certain way of thinking. So when a person thinks that way, so what's the next thing after the eggs? We know what's at the bottom thus far: burning people in their homes alive and decapitating children and rape and on, all of the gory things that we saw. And on that level, this is very disconcerting.
Drea Humphrey here with Rebel News, and Friday, October the 13th, was a sad day for Canada. It was a day when many Jewish Canadians were in some form of hiding. Some kept their children home from Jewish schools, hired security for their businesses, and police in many cities even maintained a presence in front of their centers and places of worship. Why? Because Friday the 13th was to be a global day of jihad, a global day of rage, because Hamas founder and former leader of the terrorist organization, Khalid Massal, called for it to be so. Massal publicly summoned Hamas allies around the world to take up his rage in response to Israel's defensive war attack against the Hamas terrorist organization, which governs the Gaza Strip. The same Hamas that invaded Israel on October 7th with a surprise attack of mostly civilians who were raped, tortured, kidnapped, and over 1,300 of them killed. It appears at least one dark soul may have answered Hamas' call for rage by targeting a synagogue, which I will not name for obvious security reasons, in Surrey. And today you'll hear from Rabbi Strux and his son Zev, who caught the Jew hater red-handed. And after you're done, you can head to our special website called thetruthaboutthewar.com to get reports you won't find on the mainstream media about the Hamas-Israel war from our very own Avi Yemeni and Benji, who are reporting for you in Israel from the front lines.
The RCMP actually had visited us Wednesday, and we spoke about this as well. They made sure that it's real, and they did say they were going to give us extra protection. Until this event, this particular area, we would have thought it's more calm, just the type of people who live here. Whereas we found out on Friday that this individual probably lives within walking distance. So that's already a whole different level of security concern.
Well, that's frightening to think about. Now, Zev, you were there when this person was on the property. Tell us what happened.
So it was 6:28 p.m. on Friday, and that's when the Sabbath basically came in, sunset. So my father, who is a rabbi, looks like a rabbi, is a rabbi, he cannot drive or use any electronics. So he was running late, and he had to park his car about a mile away from our house and literally just start walking here. So what I decided to do is, because I knew what was going on, he was keeping me posted, I was going to bike to where he was, and then I was going to walk with him while he, walks here, just to escort him home, basically, so that he's not alone. It's Friday the 13th. Biked to him. I pulled out. While I'm at the front of the driveway, this kid is standing there. He's holding a box of eggs, a carton of eggs, almost like it's a baby. And I'm like, he's like, "Is this the Jewish temple?" And I'm like, "Why do you ask?" He says, "I need to know. Is this the Jewish temple?" I'm like, "Yeah, I live here. Like, what do you want?" He says, "Well, I need to egg this place." I'm like, "Oh, no, the F you're not." And then I said, "Who the hell are you?" He says, "I'm God." And, there's a bit of back and forth of like, don't even think about it. Oh, yes, I will. What are you going to do about it? He just walks. I'm like, okay. He walks towards the front of our house. I pull out my phone. I decide I'm going to call police. When I said, okay, in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to call police right now. Because I knew sort of like my father had touched. There was police that came here in the days prior that said they'll be sort of nearby or whatever. So I was like, I'll call them. They should be here quick. I'll call them. But I was like, you know what? Let me film this guy. Yeah. So as I'm doing this, I sort of see him in the background. It almost, in my mind, I'm like, I don't know why he's measuring our windows. It's like he's doing something. He's doing like this. Later, we come to find out that was a swastika that he drew. But as I turn around, he acknowledges that he sees me with the camera and he gives me the birdie, the middle finger. And then he proceeds to throw the entire carton of eggs. And then, yeah, he walks off. I said, hey, let me ask you a question, sir. And he just ignored me. And I was on the phone while I was doing this too. So I said to the cops, I asked them like if I should follow him. They said, do not follow him, probably for my better. So I didn't follow him to the corner, but my neighbor, Troy, who lives here as well, one of our neighbors, he followed him to the corner and saw him turn. He didn't see any car or anything. So basically, like my father was saying, if he didn't have a car there and he saw him just walk that way, he probably lives here. And the corner they turned, there isn't many options where you can go. So it's like, and that's basically what happened. And then later, at this point, I still didn't know he drew the swastika. Later, when the cops were here and we were speaking, because it was already sunset, it was dark. But we saw the window. We were shining the light just to take some, photos, etc. We're like, oh, damn, that's a swastika. Mm-hmm. But I was like, I don't know if I really saw him do it. So, but I said, I don't think it was there earlier because we had, people over and whatever early in the day. But, it must have been him. I was like, damn, that actually makes sense because I feel like he was measuring something. So if that's not good enough, the next day, we find in the front, directly in front of the window on the floor, is the cap to what looks like a Sharpie. And I know what a Sharpie looks like, and that looks exactly like what a Sharpie would draw a swastika, like on the window. Mm-hmm. And then I look at the video again, and if you go to 15 seconds in the video, you see the Sharpie cap drop from him. So it's like, okay, there you go. He did it. And then, yeah, and that's basically what happened. He walked off, and that's sort of where we're at right now.
I mean, this is happening in Canada. It's not happening in the Middle East. And it's happening after your community is grieving a surprise terrorist attack in Israel. What did it feel like as a leader of your community here in the Fraser Valley to find out that this happened to your place of worship?
Although I've experienced anti-Semitism through my childhood and later on, much less so in Canada, especially in the 80s and 90s. So on that level, just the egg throwing, it's egg throwing. But the reality is, the thought that I should throw eggs today because they are Jewish sits on top of a certain way of thinking. So when a person thinks that way, so what's the next thing after the eggs? We know what's at the bottom thus far. Burning people in their homes alive and decapitating children and rape and on, all of the gory things that we saw. And on that level, this is very disconcerting. Now, this fellow decides he is going to throw eggs. And what about the people he associates with who are also happy that Jewish people were mowed down? All those kids at a concert just mowed down. So that's their thinking. So now, what's our concern for security? And yes, is this Canada or was this Canada? You have these thoughts because it was a complete breath of fresh air in the 80s coming from London, where being beaten up for being a Jew was a regular event in my childhood.
I just want to end in closing on maybe what advice you have for people. There's a lot of division happening. There's a lot of pointing fingers happening, again, at a time where you think people would all be coming together for your community as you grieve what's happening. Do you have any words of wisdom, encouragement, or advice for that situation?
From a Jewish point of view, one of the things we always do at a time of tragedy or something that's very difficult, we ask ourselves, how much light can we shine on this situation and on ourselves when people really don't care who anyone is, but we are just going to slaughter them as brutally as we can. And my nephew, who is in the army right now in Gaza, said, when you lift up the dead bodies, they have placed the bombs without the cap so that they should explode, killing whomever wants to give a respectful burial to the body. So when you do that kind of thing, so the first thing is, those are acts that are the most evil. Every one of us on this planet can add in acts of goodness and kindness. You cannot go wrong by doing the exact opposite. Another thing about unity. In Israel, the country was divided. The whole world saw it on their screens. Now the country is solidly together because just like those who wish to exterminate us with their explicit statement and charter, they don't care what type, how we think. Well, we have come together, and it really doesn't matter because differences don't make a difference. And that is a take-home message which I hope we can all intake, even when the dust settles. Differences don't make a difference. Why can't I be your friend if I just have a difference of opinion? It makes absolutely no sense.
Rabbi Strux wanted me to make sure I let you know that Mayor of Vancouver, Ken Sim, did reach out to him to send his sympathies for what had happened. I also received a statement from the Surrey RCMP. Their media relations officer, Corporal Vanessa Munn, says, "We recognize that incidents of this nature impact the feeling of safety and security for our members of our Jewish community. Hate has no place in our city, and our officers are working to identify the person responsible so that they can be held accountable." Our CMP is investigating the matter of mischief as possibly motivated by hate. The suspect is still at large and described as being a 25 to 35-year-old man with a slim to medium build. Anyone with information can call the Surrey RCMP at 604-599-0502. You can also email us your tip at tips@rebelnews.com. I also want to let you know, if you want reports you can trust about the Hamas-Israel war, the atrocities Hamas has done, and Israel's response to them, please go to thetruthaboutthewar.com.